Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be for the Acolyte episode 6, which is called Teach/Corrupt. So we're back to the two-word titles. Interestingly, I'm guessing this is more of an interpretation thing about like, do you almost like view Kymer as attempting to teach Osha throughout this episode or to corrupt her? And how it's maybe a little bit unclear overall, because I don't obviously get the impression from this title that like Soul is trying to teach or corrupt May. That the teaching/corruption is certainly only really with the Kymer plot right now, at least. So interesting stuff. Overall, I thought that this was, I think, a solid episode. I don't think it was like absolutely amazing, but it also wasn't bad. I've seen some people say that it is a boring episode, and sure, if you directly just compare it to the previous episode, sure, but you always have to have a bit of a come down to earth moment after an episode of nearly pure action. I think what makes this episode is that, like a lot of the marketing that you've seen during the week, after episode 5 is that finally we can talk about the fact that Star Wars has introduced a brand new Sith character for the first time in an eternity. And guess what? This episode allows us to actually have scenes with him openly as a Sith talking to another character and effectively trying to recruit them to his side, explaining his philosophy as a character. Yes, there's still a lot of reveals that probably need to come out, but that makes it super interesting that we are still exploring a Sith character, and we haven't had that in a really long time. The lineage of the Sith has been a heavily underutilized plot point, and we're finally getting into it. That's what's super interesting. Yes, it is one of those more kind of role player episodes where it just needs to serve the point of getting us from the crazy action of episode 5 to the backstory, to the finale. And so this is not the episode where a lot of the big stuff happens, but I think some of the setup stuff here is actually pretty good overall, especially the Kymer and Osha stuff I think is good. But also I'd say like Vernestra properly being introduced into the plot and how that might relate to some of the stuff with Kymer, as we'll get into, and the new big theory that I think a lot of people have. There is some exciting stuff overall here. The frustrating stuff is perhaps the Soul May side of the episode, where it feels like the weird attempt to do the twin switcheroo and it being slightly unclear if Soul knew the entire time or not, and then what the role of Basil was in the episode, and then like a lot of the scenes maybe not meaning as much because that reveal hadn't come out fully yet. I think we're going to get to that point now because Soul is about to reveal to us the backstory, but I also understand the frustration anyone would have of the backstory now having been teased for multiple episodes in a row. I'm relatively okay with it because we've known for I think a while now that episode 7 has the same director as episode 3, so they're obviously the flashback episodes, and we know we're getting it next week basically now for sure, because you literally cliffhung the episode on Soul about to speak and say what happened, so they have to deliver now. So like I said, mostly pretty good episode still. I don't think it's a giant drop in quality or anything like that. I'd still say episode 4 is the weakest of them. This one definitely benefits from having Kymer revealed as the Sith, and lots of interesting stuff to consider with him. So let's go through it sort of scene by scene here. So Osha wakes up in a cave, walks outside, and we get the reveal. It's the island where we saw Kymer on at the end of episode 1. This is an unknown island is what comes up on screen. But I'm guessing this is meant to be the canon equivalent of Baldemnik from the Plagueis novel. Not the prologue, but like basically the opening chapter of that book is Tenebrous and Plagueis going to a cortosis mine on the planet Baldemnik, and it's basically described as being a ocean world, uninhabited, bunch of islands on the side, and they walk into a known cortosis mine in the middle of a cliff face, effectively. The description from the book I think is very similar to what is here. So I think that's the idea. I think in interviews, the showrunner has said stuff like, you know, we're going to get a few interesting Legends reveals kind of brought into the main canon now. And I'm guessing that this is part of it here, especially when like one of the final scenes does reveal that within the cave is an actual vein of cortosis ore. I think they're very clearly suggesting that. And because they're doing that, that makes it feel very clearly like Tenebris and or Plagueis is going to get introduced, well, probably in the last episode is my guess. So exciting times ahead of us, because I think we know there's certainly a second Sith Lord that's going to be introduced. So, yeah, we just get the reveal that, yeah, she figures out that her clothes have been stolen, she takes one of May's knives, and then she spots Khymer and follows him. And it comes across as if he doesn't know that she's there, but he's in control the entire time. You know it. But we follow that up with a similar scene where we're going to see Osha attempt... Sorry, I'm getting the twins confused here. It's Osha here, and it's May here. May is going to attempt to kill Soul by sneaking up on him, but he also basically knows. So I like this scene. There's two kind of quick scenes here with Soul that I like the emotion that comes across here, because the connection on the comms is rough, and I'm almost surprised that they even attempted to do this, because this is a continuity point of like, he can't tell the temple that he encountered a Sith. And he doesn't say that. He says, my team has been wiped out. And that's about the only real information that gets through over the communicator before it goes out, basically. And I like that, like, they make it, I think, pretty clear why he doesn't just full-on report everything. Because he's in shock. He is really, I think, only now dealing with and properly accepting the truth of what happened. That during the fight, there was a case of he knew everyone was going down and being killed, but it was more of a case of, I'm fighting for my life here, man down, man down, man down, but I'm still fighting for my life. Now, everything has calmed down, and him having to give a report and just say, my entire team has been wiped out, the truth just kind of hits him of like, these people I will never get to see again. And I like the emotion just kind of coming over him here, and I'm basically not knowing how to say anything, which is why he doesn't mention the Sith, of course. There's also a slight sense that, like, do they know if Khymer has survived the Umbra Moth attack or not? That hasn't really been addressed. But this is where we get the switch to May, who tries to, you know, assassinate Soul, basically. But he knows she's there, and he basically is just like, hey, I'm going to reset the transceiver, you take the wheel of the ship. And then we get this, I think, again, nice emotional moment. He's on his own, down at the comm station, basically, and is like, saddened, there's anger here, he cries a little bit, and then composes himself. And it's just the full swath of emotions kind of coming over him here in one scene. And we also see after this, Basil puts Pip on charge, because that was a plot point from the last episode. He found Pip. So that's fun. There's some Basil stuff going on in the background. But Soul dealing with his emotions. And I like that he did compose himself. Like, he's not just, I think, fueled by anger or anything like that. I think there is a real sense that this is meant to be our heroic Jedi, our good representative among the Jedi. Now, what exactly he did in the flashback, we'll find out next week, because obviously they were heavily implying he actually did something himself, which is why he feels the need to report to the council, is what he says in an upcoming scene. But still, very good stuff. And then we get this. I'll refer back to the scar on the back again in a later scene. But Khymer, where he's walking to, is this pool of water. He strips, he gets in, the scar is revealed. Osha moves in, knife in hand, but then she spots his lightsaber where his clothes are. Picks up the lightsaber, and then you get the reveal, like, Khymer knows she's doing this. He lets her pick up the lightsaber because he wants to ask her the question of like, oh, you're holding a lightsaber again. How does it feel? You know, because you obviously didn't bring your saber from when you were a Jedi with you. You left it behind. But your stance is still pretty good. Maybe move your elbow up a little bit, but it's still good given that you haven't used it in a while. And it's immediately like, okay, this is the style of character that he is. He's not obviously like convincing her to join the dark side. He talks to her relatively normally and actually like tries to connect with her because they have a sort of similar backstory, as we sort of find out here. And because of that, I think she does begin to open up here a little bit and address some of these unaddressed issues that she has had for all of this time, which I think is very interesting with the character, that this is not... These are not scenes that are at all times like dripping with "I'm seducing you to the dark side." There's little bits and pieces that I think come in throughout, but mostly he does, I think, just a good job about kind of connecting to her. Certainly there's elements of manipulation at play here, but it's not like the most extreme stuff I think we've ever seen before. He gets out because he's so confident that like she's not going to kill him, because he knows she probably has questions, things that she wants to ask. And then because she still considers herself Jedi-esque, she's not going to kill an unarmed person, even if they just slaughtered all of their friends the previous day. And that's the kind of point that's made here. He kind of gets in her head and is just like, you are really struggling with the idea of if you should just kill me because of what I did yesterday, or if just the few hours between then and now, this has now become this vengeance kind of thing. And you're very much in your head about this. It is revealed here, I didn't kill Sol, I didn't kill May. But he notes, you know, very special, the bond between master and pupil as he walks off, and Osha follows because she's intrigued. She wants to know what's going on with this guy. Back on the ship, we have Sol returns, thanks May for saving him, and he says that man corrupted her sister. He now has to make things right. He says he's going to face the High Council and tell them everything. So this is where we get that reveal of like, what did you do? What did all four of these Jedi do? And like, is he going to admit to something he did himself, or just what the group did that broadly isn't known by the Jedi? Because people know what happened, but because it's all been blamed on the fire that May started, nothing really gets put on the Jedi for what actually happened. But this is exactly what the whole thing with Torben was about. It's like, will you kill yourself or reveal the truth to the High Council? And Torben decided to kill himself. So this is a major reveal that has to come out here, and I'm fascinated to see what it eventually is. Message comes in, comms go down, and he asks May to go and take a look at it because she's the mechanic. So of course, so she should be the one to fix it properly. So that makes a lot of sense. Then we get this scene, and it's basically back with Vernestra, but it's also, I would say, Vernestra's proper like entry into the main plot. Because I think there's no other way to really interpret this. Finally getting into the kind of details of what's going on this side of the plot. We've had a few lines of her mentioning like Jedi and politics and the Senate. And then this finally, I think, gives us a bit bigger sense for what we're actually trying to do here. Vernestra talks to a senator who tells her that other senators are going to vote for an external review of the Jedi Order. Obviously something the Jedi won't want. She fears that this one senator's fear of the Order has convinced many others to like agree to this review. And the senator says to not worry because the Order has always been transparent with the Senate, but we also have scenes suggesting that there are very much a few things the Jedi Order have not told the Senate. And I think what they're going for over the course of this arc, of course, is that by the end of this show, I'm guessing the Senate will find out about certain things the Jedi have kept from them, actions of the Jedi, that will make the Senate decide that actually the Jedi have to be under the Senate. Like, the Senate will control where the Jedi go. And this will be the end of any sense of the Jedi having the freedom to act on their own. So the little kind of operations group that like Vernestra is in charge of, where they're able to go on missions on their own without having to consult the Senate, I'm guessing this is basically where that style of thing gets abolished, and their ability to just help random planets kind of falls away. And we get into a real sense of the senator, the Senate and the Chancellor are the ones who always direct where the Jedi are. And so the Jedi becomes more of a political tool than a group to just help people. And it's the contrast of like, okay, the criticism of the Jedi already hiding things from the Senate, but then the result of this is likely going to be that the Jedi being under the Senate completely is an even worse thing for the Jedi. And that's the irony, I suppose, of the situation, that this is going to set the stage for now Palpatine, when he becomes Chancellor, effectively has more or less control over what the Jedi can and can't do. The Jedi are limited politically, and this creates the situation as we see in the prequels. I think that's what they're going to do. Like to know what other people think about this one. Yeah, the Jedi who was communicating with Sol arrives and reports. He tells her the comms were weak, but it did sound like he heard that the whole team were wiped out. Vernestra immediately moves to act. There's going to be a rescue team. They're going to Kofar because she was the one who sent Sol and the team out there, of course. So Vernestra, we'll find out in the next scene, coming into the field herself, stepping into the main plot. Nice move. I'm glad to finally see this happen. In a way, why have they chosen Vernestra for this role? Because they haven't so far referenced anything with her in relation to the novels. She's the only character that really is a reference to the novels. We're finally seeing them using her is a good thing. Then more reveals. Very interesting here. And again, the contrast of Vernestra properly introduced into the story, and then Kymer reveals that he was a Jedi a long time ago. She then says, "I've never heard of you." And he says, "Oh, it was a really long time ago." And given that like the actor here is like 36, and then I think in universe, I think Osha and May are both meant to be 24, because they were 8 when they were found, and that event happened 16 years ago. So they're 24. This actor's meant to be 36, but like in or around like is playing a character who at most I guess is like meant to be viewed as like 40. So when he says a really long time ago, does he just mean that this is longer than when you were in the Order, as in I was there when you weren't there, even though it wasn't that much long ago? Or are you subtly telling her that you are actually super old and this event took place 80 years ago or 70 years ago or something like that? Because one of the theories that is going to come out of this episode, and we'll get to the scenes where it's more heavily referenced, I think, is Kymer's former Jedi Master, Vernestra. Now, it worked with Vernestra, because Vernestra, of course, was around 100 years ago, because she's like 15, 16 in the novels right now, and at this point, she's over 100 years old. So she's been around this entire time. She had a Padawan in the past, Imri Kantaros. I don't think they're in any way trying to say that Kymer is Imri or anything like that. This is obviously a secondary or third or fourth Padawan that she has. And I think that's what they're maybe alluding to here. So the question with this scene is more like, are you referring to the difference between, for Osha, like she maybe has like 13, 14, 15 years of experience knowing about Jedi, and he's just referring to, no, actually this is more like 25 years ago as a difference? Or when you say really, do you actually mean it's like 50 plus years ago? And then the question comes up, like, he's clearly a human, so how's he lived this long? How is he like 80 years old but he looks like he's 30 something? And that gets into the, like midichlorians, extending your life, the stuff that Plagueis was dealing with, and the stuff that in general a lot of Sith tend to deal with, of like, how can I maximize my time ruling the galaxy effectively? Has he done part of this to extend his life? We'll have to wait and see. So she wonders, why have you brought me here? Is it for leverage? Is it because it will draw Sol here? And then the dialogue here, I think, is kind of weird. I listened to it a bunch of times and I still don't quite get in this specific scene what they're going for. She's like, his strength in the Force is very powerful. And then Kymer's like, you think that is his strength? That is your strength in the Force. That's something you need to learn. And he suggests that she swim to the ship if she wants to escape, or join him if she's hungry. And of course, she goes along with him. But the whole strength of the Force thing, we'll reference it again in I think, the more important scene about this in the next time they talk. But in this moment, I thought it was a little bit weird, because is it all specifically in relation to the idea of like sensing someone across the galaxy through the Force, that he will always find me because he is strong in the Force and can sense me? But he's actually pointing out that actually the difference is that you are strong in the Force and he can sense you. And that's the reason, that you are the big beacon rather than him being the really strong sensor. Because it's an unusually constructed sentence in terms of what they're trying to get across in this scene. But let's see what people in the comments maybe say about that. Got over this scene. There's some Basil stuff here. Basically, Basil confronts May and grabs her foot, stomps her foot. Pip sprays May in the face, but then May factory resets Pip, and we see the lights go from white to red, of course, here. She then uses Pip to sort of check on the power system of the ship, which is what she's meant to do. And apparently it kind of works this time. But it's just a fun scene to highlight that, of course, Basil knows it's the wrong twin. It's sort of unclear if Soul does, because there's an implication that in the kind of final scene where the reveal happens, that Soul actually figures it out, is like that he knew all along, or that Basil tells him just prior to that scene. But we'll get to it. Back in the cave, this is where we get the scene about what are you talking about, strength in the Force? She says that if you don't train, your strength fades. And she's basically pointing out, that's what happened to me. That's why I can't really use the Force anymore, is that I haven't trained, and so I can't use it. Keimer says that that's just the Jedi way of training using the Force. It's their one way, the only way they think that the Force should be used. But there is another way, and that is to tap into your emotions that are just under the surface: anger, fear, loss, desire. She, of course, notes this as being the path to the dark side. Keimer just says, semantics, it's just a way to use the Force. She criticizes him for killing her friends. He's like, you killed Yord. And Keimer just says, well, you're defending the guy who was willing to turn you in for a crime that you didn't commit. But then she says, what about Jackie? And he just says, you would have had the same one-sided relationship with her that you had with Soul. And I think the point that's being made here is that I'm guessing this is reference to the whole civilian thing of because you are no longer a Jedi, it always would have been the case of this is your Jedi friend talking down to the civilian, and it might not have been the strong friendship or relationship you think it is, because you'll always be, different roles in society or whatever. She says, why do you love people who can only go so far? Who cannot go as deep as you can, as Osha can. She says she's not her sister. She's not that easily corrupted. But obviously he sees some great potential in her, which is why he's talking to her, trying to get her onto his side, and I think trying to recruit her. And it goes on, and this I think next scene here is really good. I really like this scene. Keimer follows her outside, asking why you're still here. Don't you have something to do? Don't you have to finish me off, to kill me? And he just walks up to the lightsaber and is like, do it. Turn it on. Kill me. This is what you wanted to do, wasn't it? But she doesn't do it. She says a Jedi doesn't attack the unarmed. And I really like what they do in the scene here, where it then turns around to, okay, but you're not a Jedi. Why are you not a Jedi anymore? You basically are following the Jedi code effectively, but you're not a Jedi. Why is that? Did they not want you? But she says, no, I chose to leave. He says that there's this anger and there's this pain inside her, and that's who she is. And obviously the Jedi saw this and threw her away. But no, she reiterates that, no, it's the truth. They didn't throw me away. And so the question comes out again. Real kind of armor-piercing question here. So answer truthfully. Why aren't you a Jedi, given that you kind of want to be in a way? And she says because she failed. And she's obviously angry about this. This is where she ignites the lightsaber, pushes him up against the wall. Still can't bring herself to kill him. But the truth kind of comes out here. She failed. And this is where it gets into this idea. She chose to leave the Order. So what, was she not doing well as a Jedi? There's still a few questions surrounding this of what we got before was the idea of her emotions about what happened with her family always held her back from being able to, I suppose, be a true Jedi in the way she needed to. And there is the deep-seated sense of she's always held a resentment towards her sister. That's been almost stronger than May's want for revenge. It is there within Osha almost. And that's been unresolved, and that's why she's maybe never been able to do it. And I think Keimer can sense that there is a deep well of these strong emotions there under the surface that he wants her to tap into. And she's trying to hold it back because she has some Jedi training, and that's the real conflict, I suppose, going forward for Osha. And will she turn, won't she turn? And he does understand her. He says, you know, you've lost everything. I lost everything too. But when you lose everything, you are finally free. And that's what the Sith kind of code is basically all about. It's like, through victory, my chains are broken. And that's the way he views it. It's a weird one where it's like, basically, with not attached to anything, you're finally free. That sort of thing. But then we get back to Vernestra. So the rescue team is ready. And it's revealed, okay, Vernestra is going. She's going out into the field. She's going with them. Mog is surprised because, hey, you know, we're going to the Outer Rim, so we're going to have to go through hyperspace. And I know that you get sick in hyperspace. And she's like, oh, no. I don't get sick. I just find it unsettling. And for people who haven't read the High Republic books and don't know Vernestra, you might just take this to be a little bit of a, oh, is this meant to be like this version of like Obi-Wan doesn't like flying type thing? But actually, what this is referring to is that in the books, Vernestra has a very interesting connection to hyperspace. When she goes through hyperspace, she sometimes has Force visions. They basically established that when she was training with her master, like prior to the books, flashback stuff, she had visions in her early days of training. She has had them in more recent times, but there was a middle section, like, you know, when she was more advanced as a Padawan, as a knight, where she didn't have them, but with the plot kind of kicking into play in the books, she has started to have them again, and it's become quite important because sort of hyperspace stuff is kind of a big part of like what's going on in like the High Republic stuff. But the point here is that she has these visions in hyperspace that kind of puts her into like almost a little bit of a trance, and I guess that's why there is reports about her that she apparently looks ill when she goes through hyperspace. But interesting. Obviously, they have her travel without it coming up or being noted. I'm wondering, will they have it happen when she maybe goes through hyperspace at a different point and they're just waiting to show it to us? Or is this just meant to be a fun, like, hey, you know what we're talking about if we read the books? Is it literally just a reference? Or are we setting up something and we're actually going to bring this plot point into live action here? Because that's one of the interesting points with the character, is that she has these strong visions going through hyperspace. But she is going on the mission. Next, we have, you know, Basil traveling through the vents and stuff like that. Saul, of course, beats himself up for not sensing anything when he first met Kymer, which is interesting because, of course, Kymer's like, do you remember me? And I'm guessing that just means like, oh, you were not able to sense me in that scene. I'm guessing that's just what this is about, rather than maybe a sense for like, we used to be Jedi together. Now, depending on the timing, there might be a crossover here, or if Kymer is actually really, really old, he could be before Saul ever entered the Jedi Order. It depends on what way they want to go with this in terms of like how big of a reference is really being referred to based on what Kymer said in the last episode. But anyway, she says that, you know, if you really want something, it can cloud your mind, and he fooled everyone. He does reference, oh, you have Pip back. It's interesting how much you care for it, even though it's a machine. She says she's always been like that. She's had to lose a lot of herself to become a Jedi, which is interesting because, of course, it's May saying that, kind of trying to act like Osha, but there's a little bit of truth for May coming out in that, and you wonder like how much of it is real. She asks if he has told her everything that's happened on Brendok, and he kind of avoids the question, maybe getting around to, I will tell you, but we'll get to that later on. Power comes back on, Osha goes to the comms, Soul stuns her before she can say anything. The message says that the rescue team is on the way, and to leave the transponder on, and the implication is that he turns off the comms, maybe he turns the transponder off as well, not sure about that, but he goes into hyperspace, and he obviously doesn't want to be found. Where is he going? I think it's Brendok is where they're going to. I'm guessing that's where it makes sense for the finale to be. That's why we're leaving the truth about 16 years ago to the second last episode, so that the last episode could be sort of present day on Brendok. But anyway, moving on. Quick scene with the rescue team landing and, you know, making their way down into the forest just before they discover the massacre, basically. I suppose final thing about this scene as well is the idea of like, did Basil tell Soul that it was actually May and not Osha? Or did Soul know the whole time and Basil also just told him? Little bit unclear about that still, but I suppose it doesn't matter too much. This is super interesting. In the cave, Keimer repairs his mask. He said he made a mistake recruiting May. He thought that there was more than just revenge with her, but obviously that's all she wanted. What he wants is the power of 2. I'm guessing this is meant to be a reference to basically the rule of 2. Obviously we have the witches with the power of 1, the power of 2, the power of many. But I think he focuses on 2 because of the Sith connection with 2. She asks about his scar, and he says that this was given to him by someone who threw him away. She asks if it was his Jedi Master, and he goes silent, and he doesn't answer. With the idea being here is that it either has to be his Jedi Master or his Sith Master who gave this to him. He wouldn't want to mention the Sith Master because of secrecy and stuff like that, and obviously the thing with the Jedi Master is also maybe a bit of an old wound that he doesn't want to get into here. We'll see what happens. I'm going to go with the idea that it is the Jedi Master, and the reason he doesn't answer is because she actually got it right in 1. But let's go back to the scar here. Actually, we'll go a scene further because I think we need to bring in the other context as well. But just remember some of these details for the upcoming discussion. He reveals, he goes off topic here, mentions the mask is made of cortosis, but also that the mask is a sensory deprivation headpiece, just like the Jedi younglings use when they're first practicing. And he says when he uses it, it's just him and the Force and what he brings with him. He suggests that she try it on and walks off. She looks towards the mask, clearly tempted to a certain degree, but not wanting to because it represents the dark side to a certain degree. Then we get the rescue team. They find the site of the battle. They find the bodies of the dead Jedi, which is a pretty brutal scene. Like we saw them die last episode, and then to just find them there on the ground, it's pretty brutal, especially with Yord and Jackie, to see them again. Vernestra senses, kind of as she walks through the battlefield, roughly what happens. She asks Mog to give his thoughts. He basically talks through what she felt, and she basically agrees with it. The idea of like it was 1 against many, but the 1 was extraordinarily powerful. He was erratic. He took everyone down. That whole idea. An Umbra Moth attacks, and this is where we get the reveal of Vernestra's lightsaber. She activates her purple lightsaber, which is also a light whip, and takes down the Umbra Moth instantly. So this is where we need to bring this into play. Light whip. So straight away, Vernestra's lightsaber is purple. We've known this since her early book. Same with the light whip. This has been in play for quite a few years now, if you're familiar with the High Republic. This is a very, very cool reveal here. And if you're wondering, like, oh, shouldn't it be a special Jedi for the purple lightsaber like Mace Windu? In the context of High Republic, Vernestra is absolutely a special, like, high-level, prodigy-level Jedi. There's a reason, like, they chose her to be the kind of veteran Jedi in this series, is because she is extremely notable. And that's why, you know, she deserves the purple lightsaber. But then she also had like a vision basically telling her to make a light whip as well. There's a bit of a story around this where she doesn't show it off to many people because it is viewed as being a little bit of a kind of dark side style weapon, because of course if you hit someone with this, you're going to tear them apart if you're not like absolutely perfect with it. And there's a bit more kind of brutality to this as a weapon, even though it allows you kind of different options, of course. It depends on how you use it. Her lightsaber, of course, has a mode where it can just be a standard lightsaber, but it can also be the light whip. But this is where we go back to the scar and the whole theory about who is Keimer's Jedi Master, if it is a long time ago. So a lot of this stuff comes together. Where do we have it here? There's the scar in his back. So a few things. One, he is implying that he is potentially much older than he actually is. But even if he is just referring to an event from like 20 years ago, Vernestra absolutely could be his master, whether it's a long time ago or now. Vernestra's over 100 years old. It makes sense. The scar on his back, that theoretically came from a master, Sith or Jedi, they're obviously implying it comes from a lightsaber. Bit of a weird, jagged scar for a standard lightsaber. Like, you'd have to specifically do work to make that shape with a normal lightsaber. But then you think about it, What if he was hit with a light whip? You can understand it being a little bit more of a random pattern because it's flexible, and you can see the main kind of scar along here, and then maybe a little bit of a recoil making this little bit of it. That's certainly a possibility. As like a fallen Padawan of Vernestra is the Sith Lord. The other thing that adds to this is that she goes on in the scene that we're in here. Where are we down here? To basically say that this feels like something to tip the scales. And she said that in a previous episode, if I remember correctly. So she is like one of the only character maybe alluding to the idea of a Sith prior to Sol and his team encountering the Sith. And this would maybe make sense because she knows she has a fallen Padawan who maybe could become a dark side user. So that's maybe why she is being introduced specifically at this time. We are introduced to a scar on the back that's weirdly shaped at the same time as we're introduced to a weapon that is a Jedi, that's a lightsaber that's flexible, light whip. It feels like it all comes together to make the connection, I think, work relatively well. Because Sol's connection ultimately in the story is more to May and Osha. So if Sol is going to die, it's probably going to be at the hands of one of those two. Likely, I think, Osha, probably. Khmer, they're going into his backstory. So if before they maybe kill him off, you assume they'll want to deal with this plot point, and that would be Vernestra having her significant role in the plot, especially now that a bunch of the other characters like Jackie and Yord are gone. If Sol is killed, we're out of Jedi characters, and this is where Vernestra needs to come into play. The only problem with that is, like, if Vernestra is brought into the story too heavily, it's probably likely they have to kill her off, which is going to be a little bit unfortunate unless it's like huge monumental moment in the story, depending on how they do it, of course. So that is a really cool theory that I think could actually be the case. So that out of the way, yes, she asked the question of, like, what is the significance of the fact that all the Jedi were killed by lightsaber wound? Mog says that, oh, this must mean a powerful Jedi has fallen. And is like, wait, you don't mean you think Sol did this, do you? And she's like, that is a strong accusation, but we might need to consider it kind of effectively. But I think she does think it is something different, because I don't think she thinks Sol could do this. But she obviously doesn't know for sure what the situation is. So I do wonder how involved she's going to be, because they do say, look, we'll bury the fallen Jedi and then head back to the ship. But from there, where are we going? Can they track where Sol has just gone? Are they going to get a report to head to wherever he has gone? Or is this Vernestra mostly done within the story, except for maybe some political ramifications that happen at the end of the series? It's hard to say, because are we doing all of this now in a season 1, or are we leaving some of this open for maybe season 2? There's that question as well. So, next scene, May wakes up cuffed to the table. Sol is like, I have no intention of harming you. I will let you go, but first, we have to find your master and Osha. But before all of that, I have to tell you the truth. So he's going to tell her the backstory of what happened 16 years ago. He talks about how he's considered how to word this, how to say this for all this time, and he's about to finally speak. And they cut away from the scene right as he's basically about to open his mouth and tell the story. So a frustrating cliffhanger, but we're finally going to get it next week. And then the final scene of the episode, May goes over to the helmet. She touches it. She then looks up and notices a vein of Cortosis ore in the wall of the cave, highlighting that this is, I guess, where some of it, or maybe all of it, came from. This is why his base of operations is in this cave, because it's got this incredibly rare ore here. And this is how he obviously repairs the helmet, is by using some of the ore to bring it together again. She puts the mask on. Darkness, except for 2 tiny, borderline useless slits for the eyes. She breathes normally, then we cut to outside and we hear the sort of almost Darth Vader-esque breathing of a Darksider in the mask as darkness falls, and she accepts sort of the sensory deprivation, with the idea being effectively like that like Keimer said earlier on in the episode, it's like, it's just you and the Force. And we really haven't seen her properly tap into the Force. But is she doing it light side? Is she going to maybe take his advice and use her emotions, tap into the dark side? What does this mean? It certainly, I think, is meant to be the idea of she touched the dark side helmet. She's beginning to be tempted a little bit. But I still think there's a lot of work to do before we accept that she's fully fallen to the dark side, and a lot of stuff to bridge the gap, basically, overall. But certainly a very cool moment for sure. So that is the end of the episode, and that leaves us with 2 episodes to go. Episode 7 we know is probably going to be mostly... Is it going to be all flashback? Probably is my guess. Maybe there might be a scene back in the present day right at the end to set up the finale. But I'm assuming there's enough stuff that we didn't see in episode 3 that certainly we need a full episode, I think, for that. So that's my assumption. We might bookmark the episode start and finish with some present day stuff, but I think it's going to be mostly flashback. Lots to reveal. Basically, everything that the Jedi did after sort of testing Osha and sort of like sending her back, before like Soul shows up, we don't have a clue really what the Jedi did. Some of the trailers again have some scenes here. We know, I guess, Kelnaka and Torben end up in conflict with each other. I'm guessing because one or the other gets possessed, and that causes a bit of an issue. Torben ends up like losing an eye or getting the scar over his eye from this conflict, I'm guessing. So there is the potential that the witches kind of in a way bring the Jedi upon them. They started by taking control over people. But then there's also the running theme throughout all of the episodes, basically, of like Jedi code. You don't attack an unarmed person. So does one of these Jedi cut down a witch unarmed? And this is what actually causes the incident to happen. Because otherwise, it's like it's all been blamed on May for starting the fire. Now, if we are to believe what we saw in episode 3, she did start the fire. We saw that directly. But did that fire cause that much damage and then kill all those people? I don't think so. Because it's like, what killed the witches? Because is it just that they died of smoke inhalation? None of them looked burned. None of them looked like they had lightsaber wounds. So what happened here? And the only thing I can think of is that they were doing some sort of a force-based thing, using the thread or whatever they call it, and it backfired on them, and it literally like extinguished their life force. That's the only thing I can sort of think of, is like some crazy Darksider just came in and like killed them with raw energy type thing, because they don't look like they're incredibly like badly injured. Like maybe you could say like force lightning, they just immediately got like fried and like they're not like clearly burned, like they could do it that way. But otherwise it's like there's clearly a sense of like the Jedi and the witches, what exactly happened. Specifically with Anastasia and Coral, how did they die? But then also in the middle of all of this, we probably do have an expectation that we're waiting for a reveal from even further back. Who told Anastasia and Coral that it was possible to create a child effectively using their powers, ultimately? Because clearly it is not a standard thing for these witches that they just know how to create life from nothing. Otherwise it wouldn't be a threat to their coven, and it wouldn't be a miracle that Osha and May were born. So clearly someone showed them a new power, a potential that you could do this thing. And who was it? I'm assuming it has to be either Keimer or the Sith Master probably had to do this. Plagueis thematically probably makes the most sense. If they do Tenebris in a slightly different way, it could make sense for him as just they're investigating the creation of like life ahead of maybe whatever they're going to do, maybe with the Anakin reveal type situation. That as like our main Osha, a prototype for what eventually happens with Anakin. We don't really know. And that's the point, is like why I think it was not really right to overreact to that reveal in episode 3, is that we don't know what exactly happened, what exactly they did. What were they shown? Who did it? Who is orchestrating the scenes from behind the scenes ultimately? Because the reality of it is, we're going to get some sort of reveal where the Jedi all either did something wrong or feel coming out of it like they did something wrong. But is the ultimate reveal going to be that it was masterminded by the Sith from behind the scenes? And that's going to be a pretty notable thing to see happen, I think. What else? Obviously, Torben has to do something wrong because he feels he cannot tell the Jedi Order what he did, and he would rather die than say it. Kelnaka goes into exile, scrawling witch markings on his walls for years. Indara, I think, is maybe the one implied to have maybe killed someone unarmed. That's why she's confronted with that kind of concept. Sol clearly feels he has something to atone for, but he otherwise, I think you would say, feels like the most innocent in all of this because his focus was kind of protecting the girls. But what did he do? What does he know is the real question. And then when the truth comes out, how is May going to react to that? And then on the other side of the story, is Keimer going to tell Osha what happened? Or are we going to sort of like get to a point where like Osha is there when Sol tells the story as well? And how are we going to do like all of the characters learning about this at the same time? Because you might be able to do a thing where maybe Sol tells the story and May is actually quite understanding, better understands what happens and doesn't feel as bad about Sol, but maybe the way in which Keimer tells her about what happened, she feels that Sol is really kind of bad for what he did or didn't say. That's one way you could do it. Because I do think the build is probably for Osha to prove herself as the perfect acolyte, she has to kill Sol while he's unarmed. And I think we're building to the explosion of Darkseid kind of with her. And I think if Sol is going to be killed, I think it makes the most sense for it to be by Osha. And a lot depends then on what he actually did or didn't do in the flashback overall. And then we're getting into, okay, if we're all heading for Brendok, what's going on with Keimer? What's he going to do? He maybe gets the apprentice he always wanted, but then the actual Sith swoops in, kills the apprentice who's about to take him out. We maybe get the reveal of like, okay, it's Tenebris and Plagueis, the real Sith Lords. They kill everyone else. But then like, it's further complicated because maybe Vernestra has to confront Keimer if that is the Master Apprentice reveal you're doing there. And it feels like pretty much Vernestra has to die in all of that. I'm not really sure. It's very, very confusing. There's a variety of ways in which this could go. But that's exciting. And it's high potential, but it's also high potential to go wrong if they don't get it right. There's also a little bit of like Knights of Ren stuff. I think they're beginning to kind of tease of like there might be an origin for Knights of Ren as well, because the twins in all of this feel like, I don't get the impression either of them are going to be revealed to be a Sith Lord or become part of the Rule of Two. So I'm guessing one of the twins surviving will end up as like, maybe that's where the Ren stuff actually comes from, maybe. We have to wait and see, obviously. But yeah, next 2 episodes should be very exciting. Backstory reveal at last. That should have major reveals. And then the final episode, because we are expecting, I think, Tenebris or Plagueis to arrive, either of those characters being kind of fully canonized finally is going to be really exciting to see how they do it. But yes, those are my thoughts on episode 6. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode, on a lot of these theories, what your speculations are for the last 2 episodes. But yes, that's been my thoughts. Thanks for watching, and bye.